Yeah, we're at a time in history, Alex. It's like when city-states became nations, except today the nations are losing their relevance and their power, and so are the presidents. It's the big corporations, as you pointed out, these big clouds sweeping around the planet that know no national borders or don't listen to any specific sets of laws. And they're not a coherent group. I don't really subscribe to a conspiracy theory because these people don't have to get together. A lot of them don't even know each other. There's not a lot in common between Exxon, for example, and Nike or Walmart or Monsanto, but they all are driven by this one single goal of maximizing profits, regardless of the social environment.
So it's like locusts. I mean, they don't have to communicate with each other to descend on a field and eat the grain down to the bone. That's just what they do.
That's a great analogy. Yes, you're right. It is like that. And they're doing it. And they've created an unviable world. We've created an economic system that's a total failure. Less than 5% of the world's population lives in the United States, consumes more than 25% of our resources. 10% of those people own almost all the assets in the United States and a great deal of the world. Nearly half the world, in the meantime, is starving or on the verge of starvation. That's not a model you can sell to China or India or Latin America or Africa. That's a failure. It's a failed system. And so there's only one conclusion. We have to change it. And the people who are benefiting from that system are not going to want to see it change, so they're going to resist very strongly. But we, the people, must get out there and force the system to change.
But how do we do that without these different corporate interests misdirecting our energies? Because they're so good at coming in with a phony template and co-opting activist groups or creating their own activist groups for their own kind of reformoid counterfeits of real reform.
Well, the how-to is a large part of Hoodwinked. It's why I wrote the book Hoodwinked. My passion just rose to the surface as my daughter gave me a grandson who's 2 years ago. He's now 2 years old. And this baby's really driving my passion because I realized that if we stay the course, his world when he's my age, 6 decades from now, is going to be ugly. But we have the opportunity to change it, and we must recognize that the only way my grandson is going to inherit a sustainable, just, and peaceful world is if every child on the planet has that same expectation, and it's realized. This is the first time in history that this has been the case, where our own self-interest here in the United States is driven by a world self-interest. We can't have homeland security till we recognize the whole planet as our homeland. And this is very new, where we've become such a small, integrated planet. And so the book Hoodwinked is all about that. But very, very briefly, I think a couple of things. These big corporations are dependent on us to buy their goods and services, or on our tax dollars to buy their goods and services. As consumers, we have a lot of power. As taxpayers, we have a lot of power. I often think, what if we really demanded of our government that to take even a small share to start with of the military budget, pay the same companies, General Dynamics, Raytheon, whoever, but instead of building missiles, have them build and invent and build equipment that can clean up the terribly polluted lands and rivers.
But see, they don't want to do that, even though they would still make just as much money, because it would make those third world and developing world people educated and strong and self-sufficient, which in the long run the elite believes could displace them, and that's stated in a lot of top corporate documents that we've covered here on air. There is a method to this madness, this instinct by elites to not build up populations, because if you keep them poor and dumbed down, they're much too worried about trying to get enough food to eat to ever take over their government and bring true freedom.
Absolutely correct in terms of the people who are currently running the corporatocracy, but they're getting old. And there's a new brand coming along. I'm really running into in business schools that understand there's something different happening. I was just lecturing 2 weeks ago at Howard University in Washington, D.C., their law school. Most of the students there are African Americans or from Africa directly. And we talked a lot about Africa, how Africa has more resources than any other continent on the planet, and yet the poorest people. And Latin America is second. And now we've seen a huge revolution in Latin America, where 10 countries have voted in democratically presidents who are saying no to this exploitation. And yet I was asked to speak at a conference of CEOs of many of the companies that are taking minerals out of Latin America. extractive companies. And I asked, why do you want an ex-economic hitman to speak to you? You know, someone wrote a book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And they said because we realized that we could no longer get away with raping and plundering. They didn't use those words, but that's what they said. And yet we still want the minerals. So we want you to help us understand how we can work better with these people, how we can become better community members. And I think, Alex, we're seeing that in the new generation that's coming up. And understanding.
Well, I agree that there's some awakening happening, but also you're hurting them, so they want to be able to analyze you. Stay there. John Perkins is our guest. We'll be right back.
We will not be forgotten. We won't be left behind. Our memories live on in mortal minds. And poets will.
This is an abbreviated interview with John Perkins. I look forward sometime when he comes to Austin, getting him in studio with us. He is in my new film, Fall of the Republic. I'm glad to hear he's hearing a big buzz on the street about it. Get a copy at Infowars.com or call toll-free to get your copy of Fall of the Republic. You can get some of my other films free and part of the combo packs when you order it at Infowars.com or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139. Hoodwinked, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and other books he's written are really having a big effect. And somebody that constantly gets brought up to me when I'm on other talk radio shows is John Perkins. And it's another testament to the idea of if we just take action, over time we can affect change in a positive way. But don't expect things in this instant gratification society to be overnight. I use the analogy or parallel of 10 years ago you couldn't find organic food in most grocery stores. Now it's displacing the GMO crap. So that's how we vote with our dollars, and that's what John Perkins really is an expert at, is showing people how to vote with their dollars. Do you still think that's one of the most powerful tools we have, John?
I absolutely do, Alex. You know, we've seen in the past, like we got rid of apartheid in South Africa because we didn't buy from companies that supported it. We got the big corporations to clean up terribly polluted rivers in this country, to bring in more women and minorities into their employment ranks, to get rid of hormones and trans fats in foods and in animals. We've had a lot of success on specific issues. But now we need to ratchet that up a notch and say we're only going to buy from companies that are committed to creating a sustainable, peaceful, and socially just world. And, you know, for the first 100 years in this country, no corporation could get chartered unless it proved that it was serving a public interest. The charters lasted about 10 years on average, and they had to go back to get rechartered. That all changed in the late 1800s when the Supreme Court decided that corporations have the same rights as individuals without the responsibilities. But I think we need to go back to some laws that force these companies to be good citizens, environmentally and socially. And to start with, to get those laws moving into place, you and I and all of your listeners need to send emails to every company out there. I'm not buying from you, Nike, because you still have sweatshops in Indonesia. And I am buying from you, X company, because you don't. There's a lot that don't, and you can find them on Google. There's many places where you can find them. So we need. Well,
that's like Walmart. I mean, we know Walmart is a predatory company that owns slave operations, slave wages around the world. We know they come in and sell underprice, which isn't free market. It's predatory, destroy all their competition. I will not buy from Walmart because I know it's killing our country.
Likewise, I agree. And if we have a real consumer revolt, if we talk about it enough and get people out there, we can have an impact. In fact, we are having an impact on Walmart. I think that they're slacking off a little bit. They're getting better environmentally. That's a good thing, but it's not nearly good enough. But it shows you that we do have an impact. And we just need to have a much greater impact. And we need to convince these companies that if it's to their advantage to level the playing field, that none of them is going to survive in a world that we're headed toward now, that in the long run, we've all got to do a better job. I mean, it's self-evident. You have to be sustainable or you go out of existence. And that's the course that we're on right now, is one toward going out of existence. They better recognize this, too, and we need to force them. And I am encouraged by the students that I'm seeing in universities and business schools now that I think are getting it a lot more. They're being influenced by Al Gore's movie, by the Constant Gardener movies like Blood Diamond, so many books out there, films like yours, this show, there's so much that's going on that I think the new generation is coming up with a new sense of consciousness.
But see, that's the only place we differ. I think what Al Gore is doing about making it all about carbon dioxide, that becomes a distraction from all the other real environmental issues and the type of solutions that you come up with. I mean, I think that's where we differ. But overall, I know that you are just trying to get people involved, and simply getting the public involved is the start to them finding out what's really true and accurate. John Perkins' new book, of course, is already a bestseller out there, and it's titled Hoodwinked. His website is johnperkins.org. John, in closing, in the last minute we have left, tell us about your speaking tour and how folks can come out and see you.
Well, yeah, I'm traveling all over. Go to johnperkins.org, not .com. That's some I don't know, some crazy guy, but .org. And also, you can reach me through Twitter at economic_hitman.